In our last video, we tied vitriol to a sense of alchemic transmutation. Like the Joker in the Batman series, by falling into a vat of acid, vitriol, one is reborn, akin to a baptism, an unholy one in the case of the Joker in some sense. As we will note, desire works two ways, and one can be transformed for the better or for the worse. Baptism comes from baptismos, meaning ceremonial washing. Now, baptisms are done via holy water, and water is symbolic of the unconscious, what dwells in the depths beneath the conscious psyche, while holy simply means to become whole via the unification of opposites. The great dragons and sea beasts are thus the darker or shadow aspects one must confront in Jungian terms. In Arthurian legend, Excalibur itself is given to Arthur by the Lady of the Lake, another water association, given to Arthur after breaking the sword he pulled from the stone in battle, highlighting upon how one must alchemically lift up or lift above that which is being held below. We also noted how worms are linked to dragons, via Ares or Mars, the god of war, in the myth of Cadmus. The word worm, after all, stems from wormis, meaning worm or serpent, correlated to dragons. The Gruppo de Nun, in advocating for the black son of Bataille, sides with these worms in their writings, as well as the element of water, via Nun, whereby, as they note, in an inversion to Crowley's notion of every man and woman being a star, that every worm trampled can become a star, siding with the great and wormy sea beasts of the world. King Crimson's Song, the Devil's Triangle, which is based off of Gustav Holst's Mars, Bringer of War, has a final movement in it called Garden of Worm, from the album In the Wake of Poseidon, though the song itself is in reference to the Bermuda Triangle, where each movement reflects a side of the triangle itself, as the Bermuda Triangle is a place of mysterious disappearances. Historically, the Duke of Carinthia, Otto I, was known as Otto of Worms. E.R. Edison's The Worm Ouroboros links this serpent to the worm, as does Jorgenmandr, the great sea serpent from Norse mythology that encircles the earth. Even in Tolkien's Hobbit, Bilbo references Smaug, who is based on Fafnir, as a worm. So in Germanic mythology, these dragons or worms are often known for guarding gold, linked to alchemic purification, which again is done via vitriol, the green lion. And so in Western culture, we get this adversary starting to develop between lions and dragons, or I guess, like Gryffindor versus Slytherin for any Harry Potter fans. Llewellyn is Welsh for leader, as well as lion-like, since Llew is Welsh for lion. In the book of Revelation, of course, Christ is both the lion, noting his kingship, and the lamb, noting his sacrificial aspects. There is, acting in opposition to him, the dragon and the great beast. The dragon is seen as Satan, while the beast is correlated to the Antichrist. Both the dragon and beast wage war against God. As noted in Revelation 13, the dragon stands by the shore while the beast emerges from the sea. So again, we're getting this underwater sea beast aspect in association, akin to something like Leviathan, who can spit fire, as noted in Job 41, or even Apophis. Both are, of course, forces of nature. Hobbes' Leviathan, of course, represents the absolute sovereign state, which we noted with the state of exception in our talks on Giorgio Agamben and Carl Schmitt, where the homo sacer cannot be sacrificed and whom is created via this state of exception, making him both outside of the law, right, he's stripped of his political life, but also one who can still be killed and thus impacted by this sovereign power. And so a paradox develops for the homo sacer where he is both inside and outside the law. The use of sacred, of course, is not a Christian one, but based on the Roman notion of setting one apart. Thus, the sacred is not holy, where one is made whole or holy via sacrifice, tied to sacrificium, which means to make sacred, but rather they are accursed. And so how does one escape such an accursed fate? The accursed share of Bataille keeps man confined to the nigredo stage of alchemy, the black sun, as noted via the solar anus. We noted how man, via the inner experience of Bataille, will annihilate himself, his finite being, so as to access the infinite or transcendental realm of God, thirsting for his annihilation, as noted by Land. We noted how Crowley would use this for his own purposes via the Night of Pan, where, through ego death, one could be reborn via Babylon. And of course, there are the connections between Babylon and the Bible and the Great Beast, where the Beast and Babylon unify as one, where Babylon rides atop the Great Beast. Crowley, of course, saw himself as the Antichrist, the Great Beast 666, due to his Gnostic and occult beliefs, where IAO, tied to Apophis, Isis, and Osiris, is seen as Yahweh, right, Lord, or Adonai, the old and dying demiurge. Also, abrahadabra unites macrocosm with microcosm, where, remember, the 5 A's in the word make up the pentagram, right? Microcosm, represented by Hadith, while BRHDBR make up the hexagram, so macrocosm represented by Nuit, connected to the Seal of Solomon. And of course, in true Gnostic tradition, it was the snake, the wormy serpent, that gifted Adam and Eve the gnosis needed to become as gods in Eden. And so, again, we see how the role of hero and villain can be swapped based on the lens one takes in life. Like Prometheus or Karl Marx, who wore the badge of Antichrist with honor, the Antichrist is the rebel that seeks to liberate himself from demiurgic deities. As we noted with both Crowley and Deleuze, desire can always work two ways at once. And so, like solvet coagula, or deterritorialization and reterritorialization, we can break down and destroy old institutes so new ones can form via death and rebirth using the egg, or Gnostic Neoplatonic algoides, to transmute alchemically into something other, where a new day dawns, as noted by the name the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, linked to Luciferian illumination. What systems we come to destroy and what systems we come to build are ultimately up to us. Man can become more demonic or angelic depending on his psychic disposition. Lions and dragons are merely but archetypal and symbolic ways of thinking about these ideas. In Revelation, the dragon and beasts are cast into the lake of fire. Like the salamander in the hearth in alchemy, the secret fire is needed so as to transform one into something other, dying and being reborn like a phoenix. Once the beast and dragon are cast into the lake of fire, a new heaven and earth is established where death dissolves away, making men timeless and immortal, connecting finite man finally to the infinite. So Malkuth kisses Keter the Crown in this sense. From alchemic fire, one is reborn. The gentle and sacrificial lamb is also the lion. The two aspects of Christ are wed alchemically as one. The lion thus is the lamb, where via sacrifice Christ is held sacred. And thus one gets outside of the Roman definition of the accursed man. The dragon, associated with war and Roman figures like Draconarius, or as we noted with the myth of Cadmus and Jason, is defeated. But not all dragons are created equal, just as nigredo, albedo, and rubedo are different alchemic stages. From the black comes the white, then the yellow, the citrinitas or peacock's tail, and then finally the red. Historically, in Welsh tradition, there is a tale of a red dragon representing Britons and a white dragon representing the invading Anglo-Saxons. Much of the battle between these two dragons occurs underground, naturally, which prevents the king from building his castle above ground. It is Merlin who tells him of the dragons fighting below. Merlin makes a prophecy to the king telling him how the red dragon will emerge victorious in the end, and thus the Saxons are to be driven out of Britain. King Arthur's father was Arthur Pendragon, where Pendragon means chief dragon. We can note Merlin's own alchemic nature by him being a shapeshifter, one who is able to transmute or transform himself into something other. His birth is even more interesting, as Merlin is born from a virgin woman who was impregnated by an incubus demon. In certain myths, Merlin was meant to be the Antichrist. However, he is baptized and blessed by a holy priest at his mother's request. And so, while driving out certain evils in him, he still maintains much of the magic imbued onto him due to his demonic lineage. And thus, like Deleuzian and Guattarian desire itself, Merlin uses the demonic or evil knowledge or gnosis he has for good purposes, coming to serve Arthur in his court. In short, what I'm saying is that demonic things can be used for good, just as certain angelic ideals by humans can be used for evil. It is about both intent and how the knowledge is applied. Oftentimes, people who claim to be angelic or who, like politicians, put on a proper appearance often commit horrendous acts of evil. Similarly, it is the outcast who, like how Christians were persecuted by the Roman people, while deemed a demon, can offer up angelic insight and take, like a chivalrous knight, honorable actions. As Don Quixote showed, one can become a knight, even if they are not a true knight, by their very actions and deeds. Merlin, of course, goes on to teach Arthur's sister, Morgan Le Fay, who is a rather nefarious character at times, in magic, sculpting her into a sorceress, where she is associated as well with creating the Green Knight, so as to test Gawain's sense of chivalry. And Le Fay obviously references the fairy, and we have noted how the fairy ties into the transcendental, as well as Venus, Aphrodite, and Lucifer via Crowley, and of course Absinthe, the green fairy, which is made from wormwood, sharing a biblical connection via Revelation 8:10-11, as well as having the name worm in it. Now, the word wormwood actually comes from wermod, which, though sounding like wormwood, actually breaks down to wer, meaning man, and mod, meaning mind or spirit. And we have long since noted the connection of the mind and spirit via the word fantasia, which explains the inner imagination, tied to fantasy. Fairy or fae etymologically links to fata, the fates, tied to the Moirai, the trinity of three sisters who determine life and death. Linked, of course, to the Weird Sisters of Macbeth, where weird stems from weird, meaning fate. Tied as well to the Norns in Norse mythology, symbolizing past, present, and future, whom live at the base of the world tree, Yggdrasil, whose roots, of course, are being gnawed upon by the dragon Nidhogg. And thus, like alchemy or tarot or astrology or prophecies, one attempts to predict the future so as to overcome fate in the Gnostic sense. Even Merlin knew his fate at the hands of the Lady of the Lake, but accepted it. Arthur's wife, Guinevere, comes from the Welsh name Gwenhwyfar, meaning the white phantom or fae. Merlin is also connected to the search for the Holy Grail, which we discussed in reference to both Crowley and Frater Achad. Morgan, despite all her treachery towards her brother, is also associated with bringing Arthur to Avalon after he is wounded. Avalon and Tolkien's ring race, whom we discussed, as well as dragons and war, are all made reference to in Led Zeppelin's The Battle of Evermore, noting the eternal struggle between light and dark, or good and evil. Like Christ, Alpha and Omega, beginning and end, Arthur is the once and future king, meaning that he will one day return to save Britain. Of course, Merlin's folly comes from his love of the Lady of the Lake, whom he teaches his magic to. Fearing Merlin's advances, she traps him, perhaps meant to denote the dangers of unrequited love. Merlin's attempt of teaching the Lady of the Lake his magic, meant to earn her affection for him, perhaps akin to a love potion, ultimately turned into a poison. What could be a medicine for men in too high a dose can also cause death and our demise, as proved by Merlin's persistence. Similarly, it is Morgan Le Fay that is linked to the death of Tristan in the legend of Tristan and Isolde, whom, after drinking a love potion, fall in love with one another, starting a secret love affair that ends in tragedy once Tristan is killed by a lance that was poisoned by Morgan, since Tristan had killed her lover, Sir Hemison. As Crowley noted, love is the law, but love proves both a poison and a cure, like the pharmacon, tied also to the pharmakos and the scapegoat, and thus the goat of Mendes and Harpocrates, which we also tie to the Homo Sacer, the concept of sovereignty, and the dragon-like worm that can give us the gold it guards, akin to the Ouroboros that, by way of its endlessly cycling shape, which land and burrows would despise and associate with a one-god universe, makes men immortal via the process of chrysopoeia, tied to creation and destruction and death and rebirth. Lizard, by King Crimson, is an excellent example of how man has lost the alchemic dream of spiritual gold, kept in the nigredo stage of wormy war and death, using Prince Rupert of the Rhine as a means to construct their anti-war narrative. People can remain apart and remain accursed to the Black Sun, the nigredo stage, tied to dragons like Leviathan or Apophis, leading a loveless and transgressive life, an accursed life of death and war. Or perhaps they can transcend transgression itself, slaying the great sea beast inside their subconscious via the green lion, having the true knightly or Llewellyn-like courage to once again find love, even after they have been poisoned by people and other love-lacking lizards, entering out from the nightly ashes from which they have been so long interned, so as to find the white light of the sun, refracted as a rainbow, before rising up as a red bird or a crimson king of some kind. 21st century schizoid man denotes the chaos and vitriol of the modern-day man, tied to Deleuzian deterritorialization and reterritorialization, where paranoia is the poisonous door. But for every poison, there is a love potion, just as the schizoid acts as the yin to paranoia's yang, opening up doorways and liminal spaces like Hecate. Yin, yang, above, below, light, dark, heaven, hell, macrocosm, microcosm, Apollonian, Dionysian, solvet coagula, paranoia, schizophrenia, reterritorialization, deterritorialization, pluralism, monism, order, chaos, etc., are but some of the ways we can explain this process whereby one is healed and made whole, linking the all to the none as well as the one, as denoted by Crowley's 210. Symmetry, such as this, is not always to be despised, unless one plans to never see beyond the black sun itself or get beyond the black rainbow, a place where all pluralities point to nothing but putrefaction.